Welcome to R&R Resilience and Rebirth, where every voice and every story matters, because your story has the power to change someone else's life.
Hello, podcast lovers. Thank you so much for coming back. I'm your host, Žana. And today I'm so excited. I have the absolute honor to have a conversation with Kira. Me and Kira, we met over LinkedIn. And when we agreed to have a Zoom coffee date, which usually, as everybody knows, is about 30 minutes long, our conversation ended up to be, I think, 3.5 hours long, which was very amazing, which really shows that on a soul level and on an energetic level, we're very, very in tune with each other. Kira, I know so much how busy you are in your schedule. I'm so grateful for you to take the time to be on my show, to share the golden nuggets that I'm so excited to get into, because I know when we talked about, we had so many things to say to each other. But first of all, thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
It is my absolute pleasure. I do not do a lot of podcasts, but the moment we connected and you invited me on this, I was very, very excited. So it's an honor to be here and to be having this conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's the feeling is absolutely mutual. And, I actually want to dive right in because, when you and I connected first, you had blown me away with so much spiritual and energetic and vibrational knowledge that I knew of, but you had such a gift of breaking it down to me where so many pieces that were literally so unclear to me all of a sudden became so clear. It's almost like somebody lifted the veil. And it's like, oh, that's what that means, And one thing that I really was so fascinated when you explained to me about the trauma loop, and I would love for you to kind of like share what that means in your world. But when you broke that down to me, where it has so many different aspects of like holding space and being in the now, and mind, body, and spirit being all connected and truly intertwined with each other. I would love for you to go back right there and pretend that this is our first time talking with each other, because, I wish I would have recorded that conversation then. But, obviously I wanted us to feel safe with each other in sharing. But take us back. Tell me about, what does that mean in Kira's world, the trauma loop?
Well, okay, so it's a big conversation because a lot of folks in today we're brought into trauma through trauma-informed care, and it is a platform, or the platform is opening up right now for folks to talk a little bit more about it. But I don't actually get into trauma from that perspective. My version, or my I guess paradigm for trauma is a bit different. Like you, I had my past, and in my past, there was a lot of different events that happened early in my childhood that created trauma-based thinking. And what do I mean by that? So I guess I can't really explain it without going into a little bit of my story. So when I was really young, my parents' house burnt, well, I guess our house burnt down, but it didn't just halfway burn down, the whole thing burned down. And we lived in Trinidad at the time. So when it comes to insurance and all of that stuff, that was not a thing that my parents had. And unfortunately, they didn't trust banks back then. So they kept all of their resources at home. So everything went away. And that was really my first kind of paradigm of looking at the world, to say that no matter how safe you feel, everything can go away like this. And so that was my first program, let's call it. And from that script, that was how I entered into this reality, from that framework. Now, we'd moved from Trinidad to Canada after that event. It catalyzed a lot of events, and that started a series of different traumatic events that would then, transpire over the next decade and two. that led me into an abusive relationship later in life, and a lot of very, I would say, not great decisions, until there was a moment in my trajectory where I stopped and I looked around the room, and I didn't like the room that I was in or the room I was building. That was my first conscious understanding of my own patterning and my own paradigm. And that took me on another 2 decades of a journey of refining things so that I can start reorganizing my perspective, my understanding, my vision. Now, that's complicated as it is, okay? What I don't share very often, actually, I think this is maybe the second time I've shared this in a format like this, was that when the fire happened, I was the one who witnessed the fire. I was inside the home, and that was my first recollection of my consciousness splitting. So my mother's recollection of the event is that I went out of the house, and my recollection of the event was that I stayed with my mother and I walked her through all of these events, which at the time I was able to repeat. So it caused a little bit of a paradigm confusion with my mother and I, because in conversation, my mother would have one story and I would have another story. And she abandoned my story. So I felt very dejected, rejected, and I didn't really know what to make of it. That started my series of outer body experiences that I would then have for the next 3 decades. And they were very regular. So, but my family was very religious. So they didn't really like my sharing of these experiences. They felt that they were evil, and this is nothing against them. It was their paradigm of not understanding. And so I developed a very hard relationship with spirituality, religion, myself. For a long time, I thought I must be evil if these things are happening, because they weren't great experiences. I was scared through all of them. And as a child, to not have a person or a parent to support you through these complex things, it was a very complex time.
Right.
Now, that began my script number 2, which was, if I speak my truth, especially if it was spiritual, nobody will listen, no one will back me up, and I will feel alone or isolated. Now, fast forward all of these years, and really going deep into shadow work, very deep into trauma work, and somatic work. And what I've learned is that it's all a part of this great design. And what does that mean? This is what we get into when we come into the trauma loop. So, and stop me and ask me questions if there's anything that I leave out or that you remember that sparked something for you, because I'd be happy to go deeper into that. So what I started to do after reconciling a lot of these things was, number one, reject a lot of this part of me. And I went into the cycle of survival instinct. So get the good job, make the good money, drop all of this other stuff that doesn't make sense, and I can't compute and I can't calculate, and it doesn't even fit into my reality, and just hustle and get in, right? Like, this is not a unique story. I feel like we all do this. It is this instinct of just pushing through, let's call it. So my push through landed me in corporate, and I closed the chapter on all of these other things. And I decided I was going to change my spots. I wasn't going to have the same experiences as my younger self and as my parents did. I needed to make the money. I needed to feel secure. I needed to ensure that people understood me. And I needed to make sure that I was in a respectable position so that I can gain the respect that I never had growing up. And that was my driver. And for everybody that told me, hey, Kira, you're so passionate. At that time period, I got to be honest, that was not passion. That was trauma. And it was based on the necessity of pushing forward, of making sure that I was financially okay, of making sure that the structure didn't burn down, making sure all of that stuff. But it kept me in a cycle. And that cycle, no matter how much I made, what title I had, how much I grew, I was never satisfied. It was just pushing through. And there was this old archaic message that was going on very unconsciously that was saying, do not put your feet off the gas, because the moment you do, all of this can come down. And that was my biggest fear. So long story short, all of it came down. My body got sick, and my body, basically the most wisest instrument that I own, my body was saying, absolutely not. This is not the direction. This is not what you want to do. Like, get off this train. And me and my infinite wisdom was like, what are you talking about? No, we're staying on this. We're going all the way.
Yeah, even harder.
Even harder, right? Like, just
Right.
double downing on this stuff. And that's when my body started to show really scary signs and symptoms that I needed to pay attention to at this time in my career that was really defining for me. So that was my second, well, actually it's my third, the second we won't get into, but my third burn down moment happened then, where I had to make the conscious decision to leave something that was going somewhere, burn it all down. And then that put me into the cycle of going through the therapy and the coaching and all of that kind of stuff to try to understand this vessel, try to understand the system. That's what led to me trying to really deeply understand passion as a topic, as a life force, as an intelligence, because it was something I did not experience, but really deeply wanted to. And in all of that, I realized that a lot of what we do and how we work and how we perform, it's not built on our pure soul self. It's built on this scaffolding that we build around ourselves through time as a way to really protect this core of who we are. But then we forget the core and we use the scaffolding and say, this scaffolding is me, but it's not me. It's just this shell that I've built around me to protect me. And when life says, no more, you're not going to do that, it breaks. And in a lot of ways, we think we're breaking, but we're not breaking. It's the shell that we've built, the scaffolding that we've built to break so that we can emerge. And so
is it safe to say, Kira, is it safe to say that that part that you're referring to as breaking is actually a fake imaginary reality that we're living in that moment, thinking that that's the safety net? And this feels good because the reality really is that this fake safety net really does provide safety. It gives me my money. I can pay my rent. It gives me the freedom of buy ice cream whenever I want to. Yet, is it the soul's frequency of authenticity is really what actually the question would be, right?
So yeah, you're like, I couldn't say that better. That's absolutely right. There is the alternative version of reality. That's the inverse model. And then there's the reality that is the real reality, which is the soul-based model. And they work differently. But we are learned that to see reality just based on the one you've just described, the one where we are really in that armor, and that armor creates the structure that we buy into, that we call reality. When that armor is removed, your relationship with reality changes dramatically, but it's not, obviously it's not an overnight process, but it's a very different, like oranges and apples experience.
Wow. Yeah. And what really struck me is when you were talking, you referred so oftenly and you said making consciously a decision on things. And I think that's very amazing once self has mastered to really do that. But I wonder sometimes, how do we even get to that part of being able to make a conscious decision on things, even though those things that we want to maybe internally, externally change, yet we push aside, even though if they don't feel good. But how do we then really get ourselves to actually execute our human body, the shell, really of the actual path that we're supposed to be on, when that's really scary and that's all we knew up till this point? It's kind of like, yeah.
I think the first mistake that or the first, not mistake, but the first assumption we make is that this is linear, right? The first assumption we make is that we are trapped in this cycle of very rhythmical patterning. And that patterning creates that safety protocol that says, this is right, this is true, this is good, I am safe, even though I don't feel free. So I'm going to keep this going. But there's this element that the universe created that none of us like, but that element is pain. And when we feel pain, we not only are designed to want to move away from it, but we're designed to look at it. And you can go a million different ways when pain hits your life, right? Like you can go the avoidant route, you can handle it straight on, you can ask deeper questions to go under the hood and really get to the root of what's going on. Like there's a million different choices that we have to make when pain approaches our life. But when you're cycling through an episode, like for me, it was bullying, it was abuse, it wasn't great, right? Like nobody wants to be there. So it caused enough emotional upheaval in my body to evaluate, like, why is this happening? Why is this thing in my life? And what is it about me? Because that's the first thing we do. We internalize it. Am I doing something wrong? Am I a wrong person? Am I deserving of this? Right. And if we stay in the cycle of, well, maybe I deserve this, or maybe blah, 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 then you keep it going. But the moment you renegotiate that and you say, do I though? What did I really do to say yes to this? Why am I continuing to say yes to this? Then you have that spark, and that spark creates an opportunity. It's an opening. Now, you don't have to react to that opening right away, and most people don't, but it's there as a recursive refinement model. So it's not like you go from one thing to another thing in a linear way. You actually have to return to it quite a few times, but each time you return, you're not the same person. You're refining, you're getting a little wiser, you're seeing it in a new way. And so it's not like you're going to make the right decision the first time. It might take you 10 rotations. It might take you 20. It might take you 100. But eventually, you will see the error in your scripting, eventually. And when you see the error, then it's a function of trust. Can you trust yourself or the world to respond to you when you do something different, or try something new, or make a new decision, or make a new choice? And then that's the feedback loop that sends you on another pathway. But we make this real, we're so hard on ourselves, right? We make this agreement with ourselves that says, if I can't get this right, the next time I do it, then it means something bad about me. But what we're not seeing is that this is by design. This is how consciousness works. And so if we can hold grace for that and understand the pattern, and then move in our own rhythm, in our own time, to do better and better and better incrementally, eventually you won't need the lesson anymore. You won't need the spiral to return to the same thing. You can jump the orbit and move into another lesson that you're here to do. But the soul is the most intelligent structure of the universe. It already knows this stuff. It's just we don't remember because we're in this this biology that is so hardwired for survival, right?
Yeah, and it's so interesting what you just said, because I feel like that looping, that coming around, doing the 10 to 20 to 100, for a long time, I would always find myself in situations like that. It was not with the same people necessarily or the same exact situation, but it would be like a red thread that would follow my life. And I would always find myself at one point thinking to myself, again? why is this happening again? And the happening again, I was referring to that emotional pain that you touched base on, because that always felt the same. You see, the situation that brought that pain to me and the person was different, but this was always the same. And so that led me to one point really sitting down and being like, you know what? This is exactly what I want to look at. Where is this part coming from? Because for such a long time, it would be like, I don't understand, because I didn't feel necessarily that I would do something wrong, or when I would approach a situation, or I would voice myself, or I would express myself, I didn't come from a malicious part of way of like trying to insult somebody or, offend anybody. But apparently with this, there was something within me that I just haven't figured out just yet, that I keep doing the same thing, but I expected a different result. Because in my heart, I wanted to be something else, but in my execution, I was the same thing that always made those rotations. And so it's so interesting when you say, and I wish I would have heard this sentence, what you just said, that it's by design, because hearing that kind of makes me now even feel, after healing those parts of myself, that I'm like, okay, I wasn't crazy. Like I wasn't like, like how you said at the beginning, it must be something wrong with you thinking I must be something, because why are these out of body experiences happening to me? Or why do I experience this if this isn't meant for me, because I am the bad part in this? And so often we go back there mentally and blame ourselves instead of just having grace, like you so beautifully said, like having grace towards, this is meant for you to go through, because you're here to actually level up, and learn, and to see things that have always been there, but I guess you just took a while to really take the veil away, like just move the curtain a little bit.
It is a refinement process, I will say that. And it obviously, for anybody that has gone through it, which I feel like this is a universal thing, we all have our stuff, we all pattern things. And, and this is where victim mindset doesn't really help us out, right? Because we never actually get to the core wound or the core event or the core vibration of or the core vulnerability that has been created because of whatever, because we're looking externally, not internally. And reality, as the Hermetics say in the first principle, is all mind. So if reality is all mind, and my mind refuses to look inward, but look outward, then I'm not getting the right feedback in order to create the right return sequence. So it is very precise. And when you are able to create the roadmap, things start to make sense. You start to plug in and you start to say, oh, yeah, that's so obvious. How did I not see that? But the challenge with our culture is that we lost this framework. And it's not that it's never been around. There's been many civilizations of the past that have held the keys to this stuff. But we have created a reality in this era of our human evolution where we've kind of etched those things out in favor of a more mechanical construct of who we are and why we're here.
And more convenience too, to certain aspects, just out of convenience, like, okay, nobody needs that. Yeah. Like, no, that's too much. Yeah. No, I don't, that's,
right. So, we are fortunately and unfortunately in a time period where it was conducive to a lot of the forgetting. So it enabled a lot of our own forgetting, which is a painful process when you forget. But what's really cool about this time period now is that there's a lot of remembering going on. So remembering, putting the pieces back together again, which is why conversations like this is so special and needed in this time. And there's so many happening all over the place, which is helping to put the pieces back together again, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's not an easy topic, because, for me back in the days, it was always like, well, how do you really do this? Like, explain it to me in a logistic way where I really logically understand what the pattern or the execution process of something is for me to get to the actual answer, you know? And when I was told just look inward, for me back then, it was really challenging to understand how do I do that? How do I just look inward? What is it that I'm looking for? All I see is when I look at myself in the mirror, but what are people really referring to when they say, you know, look inward, don't look on the outside world? I had no idea how to go about it, how to practice it, how to maintain, how to build my own, yeah, like my own thing of like whatever I feel actually matters the most. My own intuition should be above anything or anyone, but how do you really get there? For me, that took me the longest time, in all honesty, to really build trust with self and really build trust with my own intuition, even understanding that my own intuition is actually existing within me, because I was so quick to call a girlfriend. I was so quick to be like, hey, this is my problem. What do you think? Or, hey, yeah,
Validate.
or,
Yeah.
yes, have you experienced that too for a part in your life? And if you did, like, what was your shift turn into that where you're like, you know what? None of this outside noise matters. What really does matter is that I understand to learn to check in with me. But what does that mean really? Like if I've never practiced that, how do I do that? How do I get there?
So what's fascinating, well, first of all, the beautiful um, the beautiful outcome of all of this is that eventually you got there. No matter how hard it was, no matter how trying it was. But I think
Mm.
the key in this and what the soul is trying to teach us at every one of these turns is, okay, cool. So in the past, people had teachers and gurus and, there was mystery schools and all this kind of stuff to really help humanity out. But we've come at a really evolved, even though it looks devolved, we come at a really evolved time, because what it's saying is actually, you don't need any of those things. You have your own resources. Seek and you will find. And yes, it might take a year or 10 or 20, but you just did that because we are the kings and the queens of our own universe. And we will not get to our queendom or our kingdom by someone else telling us how to do it. We have to take the journey. And so, yeah, it sucks because it would be so much easier if someone just gave us the map and we were like, awesome, you just
Thanks.
shaved about 20 years off my life. Love it. But that 20 years does a lot. It refines
Yeah.
your spirit, it refines your soul, it refines your human understanding of what this is all
Mm.
about. And that process is irreplaceable. That's where the magic happens, because at every time you take a journey and you don't know, and then you find, and then you refine, and then you refine, you're actually changing your architecture. Like your internal architecture is changing on that path. If you were to just read it somewhere, you don't get the change the same way. You get the intellectual know-how and you can intellectualize it, but you won't be able to embody it. And this is not a rehearsal for memorization like a school.
Right.
This reality is about embodiment. That's what matters to the universe, because the universe is based on frequency. You cannot be a frequency without embodiment, right? Intellectualizing something by itself is not a frequency changing event. A frequency changing event is when you go through the experience, you have a new experience, you've lived through the fire, you've gotten burned at the bone level, and you come out transformed.
Mm.
That is where our frequency changes. So thank God, in a lot of ways, that you were able to take this journey on your own and learn that. So I just want to get that out of the way first. But to answer your question, yeah, I have experienced that deeply. What was my curse in my earlier years, I have completely transmuted, and I see the blessing and I see the gift and the guidance, right? So for me, I was heavily bullied. I moved to Canada when I was young. We didn't have a lot of money. So, not great in the fashion, not great in the appearance. I was white with a really thick Trinidadian accent. And back in the late 80s, early 90s, not acceptable to other kids. So I was different and I was targeted for being different. So here I am in school where no one's really accepting me. And I'm like, not really sure as of why, but I know it's got to be something wrong with me because everyone else was having a great time with other people. And then at home, my dad had to give up a lot of his passions and his love to work for, not very much. And he worked nights. And then my mom, the same thing. So they were both stressed and they lost everything. And they're starting over with 2-3 kids on the horizon in a new country. That does not look pretty for anyone. There was some ugly times. So at home, it was not great. At school, it was not great. I didn't really have anybody at that time to validate me. So inside of that, when you're raised in that, you have a couple of options. You either keep the imprint that you are not worthy, or you find a way to figure out how to believe in yourself. Now, that didn't come overnight. Again, this paradigm led me into an abusive relationship, but that abusive relationship at the end was my catalyst change. And I'm so grateful that I got to that darkness. I really am. And I'm thankful of having that teaching because that made me confront myself. I'm getting goosebumps. Confront myself. Am I really this low? Do I really deserve this life? What did I do? And so in that question, it started to reveal, well, what happens if I change this? What happens if I end this? What happens if I, move out? What happens if I get a job? What happens if I apply for something that I could feel good about? What happens? What happens? What happens? And in every single what happens and a follow through gave me a new input, right? So I got the job, or I moved out and I loved my place, met new people. And then you start to see that reality can actually work differently. Now, it doesn't mean you leave these wounds behind. They kind of have this weird way of following you around until you go down your little funnel of cycling. But that's when I started to really develop that confidence or that inner looking. And I couldn't have had that had I not had the reflection of the contrast. So this is what's so beautiful about polarity and contrast. You're able to see yourself in the eyes of another and then decide, are their eyes on me reflecting what I believe I am? Or is it telling me a different story? And what does that mean? Like, does that mean that I buy into that, or do I change my own perspective of who I am?
That's so golden what you just said. What you just said with the whole, do I allow somebody else to look at me through their eyes and accept that reality of what they see in me? I'm getting goosebumps now. Because we do that so often. We do that so often, either out of love, codependency, pain, hurt, desperation. So often do we find ourselves in these situations where we want to believe what this person is saying because we trust this opinion so much. And it could be your mom, your father, your uncle, your partner. It doesn't matter. But then yet we never stop to actually ask, is their viewpoint, how they see me on their canvas, is that how I actually see me too? You know what I mean? Like, is that really, and if it's not, or if it is, am I okay with that? Because for so often we don't think that we actually have the birthright to change our point of view, our opinion, our outlook. Just like you said, can I, what if I just apply for a job? Can that be? And then I think that's what's so amazing about the universe in general, is that once you make that first step, they're like, okay, we see you. Here you go. Here you go. Meeting new people, like-minded people, or a conversation gets sparked, or an opportunity shows up, or like a gesture is being presented to you, or something is being told to you that nobody would knew, but they saw what you hoped somebody finally will see one day. You know what I mean? And so I think that's so magical to me when those things are happening. And also I can so relate when you said, that darkness and that lightness, that without that dark rock bottom mentality and being there's no, almost for me in my life, there was no need for me to look at my stuff without that. If I would have not hit rock bottom, I would have never even went as deep and as far to really understand what is really this whole thing about. Why am I behaving the way I am? Why is this still triggering me? Where is this coming from? Is it the situation? Is it the person? Or is it actually something unhealed in myself? And if it is, where is it coming from? And how can I heal it? Because I don't need it and I don't want it anymore. Like I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, pretty much. Like it came to a point where I'm like, you know what? I don't understand. I don't want it. I didn't like myself, the way I approached people, situations, the way I expressed myself. Like I didn't like that about me. And I had no understanding of how to change that. But I had journals full of prayers asking for this characteristic to please be removed from me. Yet it wouldn't be removed for over 25 years until what you just said had happened. And I'm like, okay, I understand. It's me and myself. It's solitude versus loneliness. Let's go.
The other part of that too, Žana, and the part that I have so much compassion for is that these parts that show up in our natures, they were always ever just trying to protect us and keep us whole in environments or in situations that we didn't have any control over, right? And so maybe it expressed itself in a certain way, and maybe that way rubbed other people's wrong, granted. But it wasn't doing it because it was this bad part that just felt like whatever. It was trying to honor you, but in a way that was turning others against you. And so it's this really, it's like a catch-22, because you never want to hate these parts. You want to love them so hard because they got your back in such a beautiful way. But sometimes the way they're doing it isn't effective. Right. So it's like I just want to put so much grace on that part of you that you kind of would and I just want to say, I love that part of you, because if that part of you didn't exist, then going on this depth of journey that you have been going and finding all these gold along the way. So I just want to honor, I want to honor that part of your story and really put so much.
Thank you. I actually thank you for saying that, because it's such a great reminder, to just really have grace and love yourself through it anyway. Even though I don't like it, I still gonna find way of loving me. You know what I mean? Just like my creator still loves me no matter what. But I think it's such a great reminder. I'm truly grateful for your kind words. This really means a lot to me, because it's, as we talked in our personal conversation too, it's been really challenging. It's been really hard to really master those deep rooted wounds and where they really came from, and the patterns that came with it, and the embodiment of opinions and of thought patterns and of thinkings, to just really decide for oneself I don't need to believe this no more. I don't have to. I can really create something that makes me feel good. And if this means I can just simply change my mind, then I'm okay to do that without having the fear of I will disappoint anyone or anything, by not holding space anymore for people or situations that simply just don't serve me no more, or I don't serve it or them no more either, because it's always kind of like a reciprocity aspect of like, as much as I give you, you will give me. And it's kind of like how inside, how outside. And, so it's interesting how we always seem to attract situation in our lives, and then when we really truly sit down, we're like, oh, it's no wonder I attracted this situation, because in here it's very similar to the situation.
Constantly mirroring and reflecting ourselves through what we see. Now, in a lot of my research later on, building the Passion Center, I came across a image, and it was describing how much information our subconscious brings in every second. And it was something like, they differed, but it was something like 24 to 42 million bits of information that were hit every second. But our conscious mind can only take in 7, not 7 million, 7. So when you are trained in a pattern or a certain way of seeing something, you're only going to register 7 out of all of these millions of inputs that's being thrown your way. So the beauty when you start to do that deeper questioning and start to see what's reflecting where and how is that you start to change your architecture from the inside out. And when you change your architecture, you start to bring in different inputs that were always there, but we were blindfolded from seeing because our architecture only modeled one reality.
Before we continue, I wanted to take a quick moment to say thank you for your trust. These conversations can really exist because people are willing to openly listen and hold space for real conversations. If this episode resonates with you, the best way to support the podcast is to follow or subscribe so that these stories can keep reaching the people who really need to hear them. This podcast began with my story, but it continues by making space for yours. Your voice and your story matters. Now, let's get back to it.
And I mean, what I find, what was like my breakthrough moment or my moment where I was just like, oh my goodness, is that this is the beauty of infinite combinations. And we really and truly have so much power in recombining our different realities that we get to experience based on understanding the program, what's operating us to view a certain way, our perspective, our framework, and widening the scope or learning how to widen the scope. And you widen the scope by building that capacity, building the architecture for the scope in which you want to see. But you can't bypass the healing process. A lot of people feel like healing's the end game, right? Like when I heal, blah, blah, blah. What we don't realize is like healing's where it starts. like what we're trained to do in this lifetime is that we take in these experiences. These experiences model a certain reality back to us, a framework. We then live within the proximity of that reality. And if that reality is unhelpful, meaning it causes more pain than pleasure, then we realize there's a trauma somewhere, a root for this. And so heal that trauma, you open the opportunity to experience life differently or having a different relationship with life. But you've got to like get to that place first. And then once you actually have that relationship with life, we have to also understand that this is not a net sum game. We come with thousands of parts and they don't all evolve at the same time. And every single one of them is recursive. This is why the journey can feel like it's taking forever, sometimes lifetimes, because in order for us to return or go through a return journey, we have to get all of our parts and call them home. And we're not only just calling them home, we're loving them home. And when we're able to have the capacity for that, we're able to then hold a structure that can hold more of reality. So it's just, I don't know, the more I get into this stuff, the more I'm just like, it's a beautiful design. but it can make you weary if you're not understanding that there is a bigger picture involved here, and we're all a part of something very magical.
Yeah. And it also can get very wary if you don't really want to invest time into your own soul's journey. You know what I mean? If you're so busy, because, truth be spoken, we're very busy, our society is a very busy society. We have these and to-do lists every week, every month, every day. And it's very challenging to find time in between being, a specific person to another, like a caregiver, a mom, a dad, a husband, a wife, a partner, a friend, or whatever. And then to find in that midst of life time to be like, and now it's just my time. But here you have 3 kids, like, I want a snack, I want this, I want that. And you're like, it's my time. I totally understand that, and I totally get it. But I think once we really emphasize on that time, and, just the other day, I had a wonderful conversation with somebody. Her name is Dr. Cynthia Benson. And I want to quickly give her a shout out here because she suggested such wonderful thing. And she said that one of her practices or ideas of how to get there is to take 7 minutes per day. That's all. Either 7 minutes earlier to wake up or 7 minutes later to go to bed, or find 7 minutes where you try to execute to really dedicate that time only to you. And I think it's such a great fitting example of people when people would say, because I was one of them, when do you want me to do that? I don't understand. And for me, I was a very impatient human. I still am. I got a little better, but at the time for me, it was very, very crazy to be like, I want it now. Okay, if I go to therapy, give me the answer. I don't want to go to whole blah 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 blah. I don't have time. Give me the answer. Here's my problem. I need a solution. And I wanted it kind of like to work like that until I really understood that the answer wasn't really the goal, actually. The walk, like that ride, that was really my answer. Be more conscious, I discovered so many things where I'm like, was it always there? I've never seen that. It's like I'm discovering certain things for the first time when in reality it was always part of me or my life or my surroundings. And I'm like, oh, I've never seen that blue house. Was it always there in that corner? Yeah, girl, it's built 100 years ago, And so I think it's that consciousness, like really deciding for oneself, I consciously want to improve within my own self. And I will take time aside to actually ask uncomfortable questions. And I don't need to go public with those, but just spend time with me, and have that, like you called it earlier, that mirror reflection and that accountability to oneself to be like, okay, you know what? This is really not a good characteristic here. I can be very selfish at times. I can be very irritating fast, or my fuse is very short, or I don't really do have a whole lot of patience, without making it as an excuse or as a scapegoat, but just simply honoring what you are in this moment of this time,
So wonderfully said. And yes, I do want to speak to that, because there are these times that we can get really busy, like I call them our functional times. And the way that we're groomed in societies, we're groomed to be efficient. Like if you think about back in school, how you're trained, right? Like you're trained to be as efficient as possible, learn the thing, get the answer, and get the good mark. But the self journey doesn't function that way. It's different rules, different laws. We also have been trained in a linear system. So if I do this, I get this. And then if I do this, I'll get this. And then if I do this, I'll get this. Linear. Life doesn't work that way. That's something we crafted. We, in life, we're a spiral, and we spiral. That is life. It's a lot messier. The evolutionary process of our natures are designed in, it is still a sequential way, but it's not the do this, get that model right away. And so while we're in our functional eras, which is really about raising kids, putting money in the bank account, like doing all the practical things so that we can build the structure, the foundation of our life, and ensure that that design's there to hold us or to hold space for us. To your point and to your guest's point, we are still required to have a relationship with self. We can't forget us in the process. And what I love about that 7 minute a day thing, I used to have 2 minutes a day, believe it or not. It was my silence time. Is that it functions very similar to yoga, actually. It's the compound effect. It's like if you do 7 minutes a day over 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months, that's a whole bunch of spackle time. And your body doesn't forget that. Your body doesn't just forget that time. That time is encoded in your system, and it stays, and it's compounded. Just like with yoga, I did this like 90-day challenge where it was only literally 15 minutes a day. And I was so impressed about the changes in my body and my strength and my posture in just that amount of time spent daily, right? So we always think we have this like really interesting mind, us humans, and we're like, I got to do all the big things, and I got to like go, and that's the only way I could get this. But no, it's not. I mean, James Clear, famous book, Atomic Habits, love it, right? 1%. Like you change 1%. And why I love it isn't just because of James Clear. It's because that's how evolution works. That's how nature works. Like it's the smallest changes done over the greatest period of time that actually creates creation. So
is it fair to say, Kira, to add at this point consistency?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Is the consistency principle, because consistency is where things compound. So if you have a bad relationship with consistency, then the opportunity isn't there to compound. But it doesn't mean all is lost. But we have to find that rhythm, because everything, when you return to yourself, when you return to these principles, it is about rhythm, being in right rhythm with yourself. And it doesn't matter how small that time is, it's about rhythm. All life is rhythm. So it's like the other thing that I learned is go back to nature, go back to the principles, because that's the wisdom. And if anything that I'm doing falls outside of that, then it's not the right thing I'm doing. Right? So
yeah, that's so interesting, really, and I like that, and I thank you for the suggestion for the book, by the way. It seems like a very great read. But yeah, it's small things combined, because in the world of hospitality, I basically grew up in, but it's really the small gestures, right? Just like you said, it's the small amount of something where you nurture it and you be consistent with it that will actually have the biggest impact. And I feel like it's the small gestures that we also give ourselves or give to others. Simple things like saying thank you and please, or saying you're welcome, or just saying hello because it's just a Tuesday and I wanted to say hello, but I have nothing else to say, but just sending somebody a quick text and be like, you know what, you're just on my mind, and just hello, without having the expectation of getting something in return or having to sit down for a whole conversation. I mean, that's always a great thing, but I'm saying without any expectation of just like, if I do this, then I need to get that. But instead, I do this because it makes me feel good. And also, I'm just putting stuff out there because I can. And not because I will get anything in return, but because simply I can, and I feel like when we all do that for each other, so much things would be a little bit more easier and lighter, because it's like, if it doesn't cost me anything, just 1 minute of my time to send somebody a text or subscribe to somebody's channel or say hello on a LinkedIn or whatever, but that in return could change somebody else's moment, life, mood, something, and I think, practicing that for oneself is not to call to be selfish, because, there would be maybe people saying like, yeah, okay, you do all of this for yourself, but you don't do anything good for others. Okay, if I'm not good within myself, I need to fix myself first in order to be good to another human or to be good in another situation. And I think doing stuff for self first is not coming from an egotistical way if it's executed healthy and in a harmonious way, but it's coming from I love myself enough and I respect myself enough to actually put this energy and this time in myself.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I will say, and this is the part that I think, remember we were speaking before, there's the there's the architecture of our shelved self or our scaffolding self, and then there's the architecture of our soul self. The architecture of the scaffolding self has those egoic perimeters where we can, in an imbalanced way, overdose on self and underdose on other. So the law of reciprocity is that there's equal flow. The soul self knows that by doing for me, I'm also doing for you. Because we are all one, individuated differently. So the more I give in and change this architecture, this being, and increase my frequency, who's it benefiting? Every single person around me. My husband, my African gray, my family, like my friends, the people that I serve, my clients. I, as a coach in this era of my journey, I could never walk in to a meeting with a client depleted. That would be the worst service for them possible.
Yeah, right.
So to your point, that part of it, of the equation, that is like, that is law. You take care of this vessel. This vessel is the temple.
Right.
This is where God sits, right? So if this isn't taken care of, then I can't bring God forward into this world and interact into this world. That's how I see it.
Yeah, no, and that's wonderful. And now that you mentioned, clients and stuff, I'm so interested. Can anybody become a client of yours? Because I'm just wondering. I certainly wouldn't mind, having some coaching lessons with you. But like, since you brought it up, I'm wondering, can anybody just, like reach out to you and be a client to you? Do you have specific guidelines of how to go about that, or how does that work in Kira's world?
So my client times are restricted because I'm divided into 3 different buckets right now. But the clients that I do work with, or the ones, and we go through a little bit of a exploration call to really identify what's the root issue, how can my services or what I'm doing in the world support you. And if those 2 things are a match, then there is a process to onboarding. That being said, who I get really jazzed by and who I love, absolutely love working with are folks that aren't just looking to check something off a box or for accountability or to get a goal. I'm looking for those that they want to get to their root stuff. They want to go the distance, they want to go the depths, and they're really ready to dismantle in order to emerge. And so, if folks are in that part of their journeys where they're like, yeah, man, I am so ready to go to the depths, then I'm so ready to be in partnership with that. But so yes, I do have a process, and
Sure.
I don't have just like one type, but usually it's people that are in transition or folks that are really looking for a deeper journey to go through.
And it almost sounds like also just people that are really ready to take the leap of being teachable, but also ready to make that actual change. Knowing that something internally is really ready to be transformed and just needing a little help and a little guidance of how to execute maybe the transformation, if that's fair to say.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because the way that folks take this journey is we've got this language, but the language barrier is that this stuff isn't coaching in the traditional sense. It is architecture work. So it really is a program that people move through. I mean, you get a course book, you get videos, you get me, and you get a journey. And it's really about committing yourself to the journey and going through all the paths, the steps, in order to come out on the other side of that with clarity. So yeah, like that's the process of it. But it's something that is, in my opinion, it's so needed in this day and age.
Sure, absolutely.
Where are the guardrails and the lights when we're going through something as complicated as our inner realities, and how does that shape shift our outer realities, and are we ready to dismantle? Are we ready to actually say, okay, well, this will involve change, and I'm prepared to do the hard things.
And also embrace the unknown fundamentally, just really be ready to embrace the unknown, But yeah, I'm asking because if it's okay with you, I would love to put in the show notes, like, a link where people can just kind of like connect right away with you. Yeah, I think it's really also about, we all know internally what's going on. You know what I mean? Like if we're all really truly being very transparent and honest with ourselves, we know internally the things that we should take on. And I'm just really grateful that there is light workers like you out there, that kind of help through the process, that just kind of like really, in a sense, take you by the hand and make you feel not like you felt when you were in school,
Right.
When you had to kind of like basically walk through that, in a sense, all by yourself, which you managed and you did very beautifully. And you obviously came out to be an extremely inspiring human being and very kind soul. But it would have been a little easier to have like another Kira there, to kind of like guide you through and see things from another perspective and explain it, and just, have that safety net of like, no matter what, like, we're in this together. Like, I know because I've been there, and for me, it's always wonderful to work with human beings on any kind of basis that have been in struggle mode, have been in desperation, have been in really dark spots where it's so much easier to really relate an issue or a struggle where it's like, I know, I see you. I maybe did not have the very same struggle, but I know how you feel because I've been in a struggle that really kicked my booty too. And I know what this means to get out of it, So I'm very grateful that you, obviously are in the space of offering your knowledge and your wisdom to the public, because we need this, and that's why I'm so much more grateful that you took the time today to talk to me and be on my show, because I know how busy you are. So I'm so very happy, and I'm so grateful we crossed paths in this lifetime. I did wanted to say this here very quick.
Oh my gosh, it's same all the way around. It's always wonderful to connect to your heart. I feel so honored to chat with you every time we get on Zoom or what have you. I always leave inspired and really connected to your story and your journey and what you're going through to unveil yourself and your vulnerability. It's great. So thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Well, thanks, Miss Kira, and podcast lovers, another great one. If you have anything to share, if you have anything to say, if there's anything on your heart that you want to share, your story, your transformation, your struggle, your failure, or your success, come join my mic. But until then, stay rooted, stay grounded, and always stay connected to love, the strongest force in the universe.